everyone. I am gonna record a video covering quadratic formula. So we didn't have time to do this in class. And so because we're missing a class, I'm gonna go ahead and discuss the quadratic formula. We're missing a class on Monday. Okay, so for the quadratic formula, here is the deal. So we've got 8x squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Notice that this equation is in standard form. So this is standard form. And so that's important because if it's not, you are supposed to convert it to a standard form. So first, I'm going to do just something easy, and then we're going to look at the harder examples. So for our example number 1, we're going to look at x squared minus 3x minus 2 equals 0. Okay, so we're trying to use the quadratic formula. Here is the way the formula looks like. It's negative b plus minus, so this would be x equals. Then we have something called discriminant, and we're taking the square root of that. So I'm going to call it d, and then we're dividing that by 2a. Okay, and so that's the formula that you need. You're never going to have to memorize it. I think if I ask you, I will write the formula. Okay, now what is this mysterious d? So the mysterious d is called the discriminant. And you always find it first. And this discriminant is going to tell you a lot. So what is it going to tell you? First of all, if the discriminant is a square of some number. So what if it's like 36 or 4 or something like that, but it has to be positive? Then you have two roots that are integers. So two integer or fraction. Actually, it could be a fraction. Okay, so but at least you will know that that's what's supposed to happen. If d is just positive but not square, then you will have radicals. So two solutions with a radical. So like it'll have some kind of square root of 5 or square root of 3 or something like that. So that could happen. This could happen. Now, if d equals 0, then you have only one solution. And that's actually going to be negative b divided by 2a. And then finally, if d is negative, then you're going to have imaginary units. So those eyes and stuff like that. Okay, so we're going to look at the first example. So first I'm going to use the discriminant to figure out which case I have. So just before we get started, make sure that you write down the values of a, b, c. So a is the coefficient of x squared, b is the coefficient of x, and c is the number. So we've got 1, negative 3, negative 2. So for d, we get b squared. Now this is something that I see all the time. When people plug in, so the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. Okay, that's the formula for it. Now you're gonna plug it in. So I didn't actually write the formula, did I? It's b squared minus 4ac. That's the formula. Okay, so when you're trying to plug in your ABC into the formula, make sure if the number is in negative, always put them in parentheses. So this will be negative 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 2. So this would be 9, because in any number squared, it's a positive answer. So do not put it here negative 9. That will be incorrect. And then here you have 4 and 2, that's an 8, and the two negatives become a positive, so that's going to give me 9 plus 8 equal to what? So in this case, that would be 17, right? So this number is not a perfect square, right? And so that tells you that you're going to have irrational solutions, square roots, okay? So, but now let's go ahead and figure them out. So you're going to have negative b right? So you take negative b, but b was negative. So when you put negative over negative, that's actually going to be a positive. So 3, and then you're going to have plus minus square root of the discriminant. So that's 17. And then you dividing that by 2a. So 2a, 2 times 1, that would be 2. So you're going to have solutions 3 plus minus square root of 17 divided by 2. Now, if you need to write them each separately, you can do that. So if the first one will be 3 plus square root of 17, the whole thing is divided by 2. And the second one is 3 minus square root of 17 divided by 2. Okay, so those are your solution stats. Now, if you had a nice number, like if you had a 16, that would be great, but you don't have it, right? So you have what you have. Okay, so that's example number 1. Now let's look at example number 2. And so let's say we have an equation that we are trying to solve. So we'll look at another example here. Okay, sorry. Where's my board? Okay, so one more example, closing that. Let's say we have x squared plus x plus 5 equals 0. Okay, so what happens here? So here I put a equals 1, b equals 1, c equals 5. So first, because this is like 1x squared, 1x, right? So first I'm going to try to find the discriminant. So that would be b squared minus 4ac. So I'm plugging b squared, that's going to be 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5. And so I would get 1 subtract 20. Well, that is negative 19. So that means that I will have imaginary numbers, those i's in the answer. So let's go ahead and write down the answer. So it's going to be, the formula is negative b plus minus square root of the discriminant divided by 2a. So that's the formula. Okay, so negative b was 1. So negative 1 plus minus square root of negative 19 divided by 2 times 1. Okay, so I get negative 1 plus minus. So how do I handle taking a square root of a negative number? So if they told you, we don't want imaginary numbers, you would stop at this point and you say, I have no solution. No real solutions, because if you talk about real solutions, square root of negative 19 does not exist. But if you don't, if you want imaginary ones, so here is what you do. First step, you ignore the negative, like it's not even here, and you just write square root of 19. You can't simplify that. That's an ugly number. It's not like it's square root of 16 where you can say that's a 4, but square root of 19. So you're gonna keep that, and then the negative, you like say to yourself, oh, I do have a negative here, right? So if there is a negative, you just put an I. Okay, that's it, and then you divide that by 2. So if you need to separate them, you can separate them. So it's negative 1 plus, usually we put I at the end. Does it matter? Not really. So I'm just going to kind of follow what people do. And then the other one is negative 1 minus square root of 19. And then I, be careful, it's always outside of the root. It's not under the root. So those are my two solutions. Okay, the last example we're going to do on this thing. And so suppose you have something like this. So let's say you have x squared, and then you have minus, let's say 8x plus 16 equals 0. So let's say you got something like that. Okay, so you got a equal 1, b equals negative 8, c equals 16, right? Okay, so here, what's gonna happen? Checking the time here. Okay, so I'm gonna find the discriminant first. So you get b squared minus 4ac, right? And so that's gonna be b squared. Now b is negative, so don't forget to put it in parentheses when you square, because it's incorrect to write it like this. This is not good at all. So if somebody writes like that, I'm taking off points, because that's actually negative 64 and our answer will be positive 64. So this is not right. So anytime you're plugging a negative, put it in parentheses. minus 4 times 1 times 16. So I get positive 64, subtract 64, and that's a 0. Okay, so what does that tell me? So I'm plugging it in the formula that says negative b plus minus square root of the discriminant divided by 2a. So negative b, negative of negative 8, that's a positive 8, plus minus square root of 0 divided by 2 times 1. Well, guess what? Square root of 0 is 0. So the plus minus 0, that's not going to change the 8. 8 will stay the 8. So you get 8 divided by 2, and that's a 4. So in this case, you got only one solution. So look, I've looked at a case where you have two different solutions. They were irrational because it was square root of 17, but they were real numbers, meaning I didn't have an I in them. Then I had two solutions that had an I in them, and that's when the discriminant was negative. So if the discriminant was positive, you always have two real solutions, possibly integers, and possibly you're going to have fractions, maybe even have irrational numbers like square root of 3, square root of 5, whatever, but there will be no I. And then if the discriminant is negative, that's when you have the i's in there, and then the discriminant is 0, you only have one and one solution. Okay, I hope that was helpful, and I'll see everybody in class on Wednesday.